did that. And I will introduce Jamie Robinson, who is the Hamilton resident we were just talking about there. Jamie is the technical lead at Safe System Solutions. And many moons ago, Jamie and I started work together at the Victorian Road Authority, Vic Roads. And Jamie did a lot of technical engineering work there. And his last role there, it's probably almost 7 years ago now, Jamie. We were technical lead of traffic engineering and design. And then he came and joined Safe System Solutions with myself. And so Jamie does a lot of road safety auditing, technical design work, reviews, and runs our barrier training course, road design for heavy vehicle training course. And I asked Jamie to come along to talk about the detailed design or design stage road safety auditing, which in New Zealand, everything's a design stage, except for the post-opening, because existing conditions are not termed a road safety audit. So the design phase, but particularly I wanted Jamie to talk to you a little bit about some of those reviews you might do or might require from a designer, such as swept path diagrams and little bits and pieces, just to give yourself assurance as a road safety auditor that you've thought through not just those bigger picture issues, but also some of the really detailed technical elements as well. So, Jamie, I'm going to hand over to you, and you've got some slides to share, and we will, just like usual, Jamie's got Wally appearing a couple of times, probably. And also, of course, ask any questions as we go. Over to you, Jamie.
I hope you're seeing the right screen there, are you, Ken?
Yes, we are.
Right. No, welcome everyone. So just to start, I'd like to discuss briefly the difference between a standards review or a design review and a road safety audit. There certainly is some overlap between the two processes, and often a client won't be quite sure which of the two they're after. A standards review and a design review is exactly that. It's a check against standards, and there is an inherent level of safety built into standards, but that's not to say that everything built to standard will be safe. A road safety auditor has the luxury of looking at a project with their road safety hat on only. They're not constrained by other considerations of the project, such as cost and environmental impacts and so on. So look, if we're designing something to standards, it has a level of safety, but with any design element, there is a spectrum of acceptable values. There are minimums right up to the desirable level. And it's when we're combining a range of minimum standards that we often do come into trouble. A road safety auditor should have an appreciation of standards and of safe design principles, but doesn't necessarily have to be a standards expert. If we're dealing with audits sort of towards the detailed end of a project, then there is a greater need to have that awareness of standards. But basically anyone with a good level of common sense and an appropriate level of background in the roads and road safety area can be involved in a road safety audit. So when we're undertaking a road safety audit at a design stage, we obviously have a set of design drawings, and that can be pretty extensive, especially when we're dealing with a project at the detailed design stage. In addition to that, you might receive or you might request some additional information to help you understand the background and the context of the project. It's really important to understand the design vehicles that have fed into the design, as well as the design speed in particular. Those two things together affect a lot of the geometric elements of a design, a roadway design, an intersection design. So know those pieces of information. You may receive some vehicle swept paths, and that they should be prepared as an integral part of the design process. So if they can't readily be provided, that's a bit of a red flag. Traffic data, volume and type of different vehicles and other road users, including pedestrians and cyclists. The crash history of the site. You might like to know a lot of projects are driven by road safety issues. Some auditors I know don't like to receive the crash history. They don't like to look at a project with the blinkers on, so to speak, and be focused on the issues that have happened in the past. And I can understand that because there is a randomness to crashes that occur in a lot of cases. But certainly if there is a trend of crashes happening at a particular site, I like to know about it. If there have been previous audits undertaken, you ought to review those reports, if only for your own learning, to understand what another auditor might have thought of a project. If a project has been audited at an earlier stage, it's important to consider the issues that were raised at that stage and tick them off, or consider reiterating them if you think that the issue is still there. So there's a whole list of things that you might receive to consider as part of the audit, but if you don't receive it and you're interested in additional information, I encourage you to request any information that you think is useful or important to understand the context of that project. A few issues that commonly that we commonly find when we're auditing projects at the design stage is that the project might not cater adequately for the chosen design vehicles, or that choice of design vehicle is incorrect in the first place. Now, Ken tells me that you're a very knowledgeable audience. I'm not sure if I need to explain what a design vehicle is, or a checking vehicle, but perhaps I briefly will. The design vehicle is the largest vehicle, typically a truck of some description that you would expect to use that piece of road or intersection on a regular basis. And we would generally design for that vehicle to be able to undertake movements in a desirable way. So make its turns from the designated turn lanes if they are provided, and not encroach spaces that we wouldn't want them to. We also use a checking vehicle as part of our designs as well. So that's a larger vehicle again that we might expect to come along just once in a while. And because it comes along so infrequently, and perhaps even under an escort, we allow that vehicle to navigate the intersectional road in a less than desirable way. So it might have to swing out wide into the roadway in order to make a turn. It might mount some raised islands or the like. So it might influence our placement of roadside furniture, or we might pave some areas behind curb to accommodate that vehicle. So we typically do have a design vehicle and a checking vehicle for any particular project. You can get out on site and observe the vehicles getting about at your project location to determine what you think is an appropriate design vehicle. Keep your eyes peeled for land use in the vicinity of the project and potential land use changes, and the effect that might have on the vehicles that are being attracted to that location. So what does it matter if our choice of design vehicle isn't what it should be? Some potential issues are that vehicles will encroach into areas that they shouldn't. It might be an adjacent traffic lane, a pedestrian area at the corner of an intersection, especially if a large vehicle doesn't have enough space to turn left particularly. We might have vehicle conflicts within intersections, perhaps some concurrently turning right turners from opposing directions. We might have impacts with roadside furniture, and that really is a telltale sign that there isn't enough space for certain movements. Now, those issues relate generally to there not being enough space for a large vehicle to turn. We can go go too far the other way and provide too much space. If we assume a vehicle that is too large or are too generous when we're plotting our swept paths, we can end up with some pavement areas that are excessive, which might mean that there are areas where movements and priorities are not clear. We might allow smaller vehicles, to turn at excessive speed. So we really want to make our intersections and roadways as compact as possible, subject to the swept path requirements. There is a heap of guidance in the Austroad suite around swept paths at intersections in particular. You might be familiar with some of these diagrams. On the right, we have a snip from the Austroad's turning path templates guide, showing, I think, a semi-trailer turning at a particular radius and speed. So for each design vehicle, there is a range of turning speeds and radii that can be applied to different situations. So it's important to choose an appropriate turning speed and radii. The minimum radii and turning speeds might apply to a mandatory stop situation. So if your situation is not that, you need to be more generous. So that is a common shortcut that a designer might take if they're in a particularly constrained location. They're really trying to screw things down. Where we do have turning movements at intersections, there are a range of requirements around those turning speeds and radii and clearance between opposing vehicle paths. So you can see in this case here where we have two trucks turning side by side, there's a clearance requirement between those. A minimum radius is nominated, and there's a clearance also between the opposing directions. So you ought to be checking any design against those requirements. Here's a design that on face value might appear to meet those requirements in that it does have a clearance between the opposing swept paths. But I'll tell you, this is not a good one. In particular, the purple truck approaching from the right has been drawn in a far less than desirable way. So we typically prepare our swept paths in software like AutoTurn, and it really is open to a bit of manipulation. So it's important to know what you're looking at if you're reviewing one of these diagrams. The first thing that jumps out at me with this purple example is these little arrowheads along the center line of that movement. There's one there. They basically represent decision points. So a change in direction by the driver. It is desirable for a swept path for a turn such as this to be drawn on a single radius. This is obviously not. We have the truck approaching on a straight, undertaking a short turn, straightening out again, and then a tight short turn. So that's not how a driver unfamiliar with this location would be expected to navigate the intersection. If the swept path had been drawn on in the desirable way, at the desirable radius with a single curve, there'd be quite an overlap between the two swept paths from either direction. So it can be fudged and sometimes is by designers. This appears to be a particularly constrained location, and it looks like a bit of a back to front design where an intersection has been drawn within the available space and then some swept paths have been dropped on the top to make it look like it will work. What's the safety issue associated with this problem? Look, it really does depend. You wouldn't expect two truck drivers to continue into that collision situation. They would take evasive action, which could lead to other issues, trucks encroaching areas that they shouldn't, and potential conflicts with other traffic. You really would need to think about the likelihood of two trucks of this size arriving at the same time. And of course, the potential for this collision could be largely managed through the signal operation as well. Here's a better example of a swept path diagram, certainly a more transparent one.
Sorry, Jamie. Do you want to just jump back one slide there? The couple of things that I wanted to say is, one is why would a designer do this? That's the first one. And second one is talking a little bit about road safety auditors' responsibility in this sort of stuff, and how you might pick this up, or are you expected to do the swept path diagram yourself, or is that something you would get in the package of documentation or the like?
A road safety auditor certainly wouldn't be expected to prepare any swept path diagrams. You would often receive them. If I didn't receive them, I would make a comment in an audit report to that effect, and that they should be reviewed. If I had any sort of big concerns with there not being enough space, I certainly would be requesting them from the designer. And as I say, if they're not forthcoming with that, that really does ring the alarm bells.
So the other one was about why you might see this sort of stuff produced. Yeah,
a good question. Sometimes there's pressure on designers to make things work, especially in developer situations. And look, a lot of the time, something like this might slip through if the people reviewing weren't confident in what they were looking at. So, look, unfortunately, it does sometimes happen that things like this are prepared. Look, I've prepared, I won't say similar diagrams, but an exercise that designers sometimes go through is to plot what a driver would need to do to navigate a situation, to think about how bad the situation in fact is. So, perhaps I shouldn't be too hard on this. This might not be someone saying, yep, it all works fine. It could have been prepared to demonstrate, how bad it is.
Yeah. And so what could you recommend as a road safety auditor for making this better?
The ideal outcome would be that the intersection would be redesigned to accommodate those concurrently turning right turns. Ensuring that the choice of vehicles for those movements is correct would be a first step. An alternative recommendation would be to ensure that the signal phasing, the intersection split phased or similar, to ensure that conflict can't happen, or its likelihood is minimised anyway.
Okay. What's that standards review finding?
Sorry, Ken, you just dropped out a little bit there.
Sorry, I was just looking at that standards review finding circle on that slide.
So I think that's referring to the conduit and the fact that it is not contained within the road reserve. So that's not something that we would do without acquiring land. Sorry, I apologise. I have a little visitor. Lockdown and homeschooling has its challenges.
Well, I'll take over for a second here, Jamie. Yeah, I suppose that's an example there of what would be identified in a standards review, but is not something that you'd point out as a road safety audit or really be looking for. I mean, that there's not a road safety audit issue with a conduit going through a private property. I mean, good luck. It's going to be a project challenge for you, certainly. And as a standards review, that's the kind of thing you might be picking up. So the circle at the top there is really looking at property boundary to curb line challenges, which certainly could present safety issues with pedestrians having to walk onto the road potentially, or yeah, I mean, just generally how that would work, and I can see safety issues with it. Yeah, okay, there you go, Jamie.
About that. A better example of a swept path diagram might look like this. You can see here that the turning radius is nominated. It's a 12.5 metre radius to the outer wheel path. And I should mention that there are a lot of lines going on here, and there are options to turn lines on and off in the software used to generate these swept paths. And it's probably a good idea to turn off a lot of those that aren't so important. The most important lines to consider are the wheel paths and the lines that represent the outer extremities of the vehicle body, to ensure that we have clearances to roadside furniture and so on. We will often plot an additional line, a parallel line to the body of the vehicle, and you can see here on either side 2 parallel lines. That's a 1/2 metre clearance line on either side of the vehicle as required by Austroads, which should be provided to roadside furniture, to curbs and so on. So this swept path diagram is for a design that we inherited. Swept path diagrams had been prepared in a creative way that showed that the required vehicles could get through the intersection. We had our doubts, so we replicated them in a more desirable way, or in the desirable way, which showed there were quite some issues in terms of vehicles encroaching areas that we wouldn't want them to. In particular, at this southwest corner of the intersection, the turning bus encroached significantly into a pedestrian area. So we have a potential safety issue there associated with a large vehicle striking a pedestrian. Checking some movements on the other side of the intersection, we found that there was quite an issue with overlap of vehicles that would be allowed to turn concurrently under the proposed phasing. So you can see here an overlap in the order of perhaps 2 metres or more. So again, the desirable thing to do would be to widen the intersection to remove these conflicts, potentially amend our phasing if we're able to, subject to capacity and so on, to accommodate these vehicles. Signs that you might encounter
Sorry to jump in again, Jamie. Just while it's hot on this one, there's a comment that no buffer. So back onto the swept path diagrams, no buffer. Do you usually provide a sort of safety buffer?
Yes. So we typically would provide at least a 1 metre clearance between opposing movements. I'll just skip back a few slides. So some of the Austroads diagrams show some of the clearances, and there are similar clearances apply to right and left turn overlapping movements. So you certainly do want that buffer. And if you're plotting that 1/2 metre clearance line for both vehicles, it can be much easier to determine whether you've got that sort of 1 metre minimum buffer. So that's between vehicles. You also need to provide a buffer between those turning vehicles and curb lines, any roadside furniture and so on. So plotting that offset line can help you determine if you do have that required buffer.
Yeah, and Mark's come in with another, I suppose, thought-provoking comment for road safety auditors is the ability to risk rate these kind of issues. You mentioned with the one where they fudged the swept path diagram, and you mentioned there that the heavy vehicle operators are unlikely to just run into each other because they're pretty good and they'll see that sort of coming. So how do you, and even this one as well, I suppose, maybe this one's a little bit more complicated, but how do you go about thinking of the risk rating in these?
Yeah, it's a good question. It really is a case specific, case specific thing to think about. The likelihood of the event happening will depend on the numbers of those heavy vehicles approaching from either direction and the likelihood of them being there at the same time. Your speeds involved are going to be low if we're talking about the collision between those turning vehicles. Perhaps of greater concern are the vehicles that take evasive action or that encroach into pedestrian areas because they've taken they don't have enough space to sort of swing out wide to take a turn. So crashes with vulnerable road users, it might be a cyclist that's coming through the intersection at the wrong time. So I guess that points to the the desirability of consistency in design and designing all intersections in a similar way. If a driver has passed through any number of intersections along a route that they've been able to get through at a certain speed and turning in a certain way, and then they encounter an intersection like this where they can't do the same, perhaps they're a little fatigued. That's where issues arise. So the risk, really does relate probably more to those, those other possibilities rather than the collision between those two opposing vehicles. Telltale signs out on site that there may not be enough room include vehicles tracking behind curbs, and you can see here vehicles, presumably trucks, have been mounting the curb here. Not always a sign that there's not enough space. Perhaps excessive speed is an issue. And I'll point out that it is nearly always the rear axles of longer trucks and articulated vehicles that end up in these areas. The driver will take a path where the front of the vehicle, is within its lane, but due to the cut-in effect that longer vehicles experience, the rear axles will track inside the front of the vehicle. Here's another example, and you can see by the tyre marks that trucks have been significantly encroaching this raised island. Perhaps there's not enough space, but perhaps there are other things at play. Certainly there's very little contrast or no contrast between the concrete road pavement and the raised island. I've had it suggested to me that there is an issue of excessive speed at this location, which is near the Port of Melbourne. You can see that the vehicles have encroached pedestrian areas here and gone straight over the tactiles. At the pedestrian crossing point, you wouldn't expect a driver to continue into a pedestrian if one was standing there. I'd suggest again that the greater risk to pedestrians is on the other side of the road, where the vehicle might cut in as it's turning and the rear of the vehicle might collect a pedestrian. And there's been a couple of recent examples of this happening in Melbourne, resulting in some pedestrian fatalities. Roadside furniture impacts is another telltale sign, which in itself perhaps isn't a big issue, we can go back and replace or reinstall the sign. You need to be thinking about what drivers might do alternatively to avoid striking these signs. Another prime example is a keep left sign on a splitter island. You frequently see these signs knocked down. So if a driver of a large vehicle was required to navigate an area like this, and they realise that they wouldn't get around without impacting the sign, what do? Instead, they might encroach an opposing traffic lane in order to make that movement. They might, and that in turn might increase the risk of crashes such as head-ons. They might encroach bike lanes. So think about what vehicles would need to do and the risks associated with those manoeuvres. A road safety issue that commonly comes up in road safety auditing is sightline issues, in particular restrictions to sightlines. So a design might not provide sight distance between vehicles, from a vehicle to another road user, such as a pedestrian at a crossing point, or to the pavement. Now, there's a list of sight distance requirements as long as your arm in the Austroads guides. I'm sure you've heard of some of them. If we're talking to sight distance to the pavement, we're talking probably about approach sight distance, which is measured between the driver eye height and the pavement level to allow motorists to see pavement markings in particular. To other road users, there are pedestrian crossing sight distance requirements. Now, these sight distance requirements are often restricted in various ways. The road alignment might restrict sight distance, so horizontal curves with obstructions on the inside of the curve. Vertical curves, crests, can obstruct sight distance. And where we have horizontal and vertical curves in combination, the situation's even worse. And on top of that, we know that run-off road crash likelihood is increased at horizontal and vertical curves. So that's something that we try and avoid where possible, or if we are combining these elements, that we adopt geometry that's as generous as possible. Parked vehicles and roadside furniture often restrict sight lines, and parked vehicles is a bit of a contentious one. There's a school of thought that a parked vehicle is a sort of a temporary obstruction. You ought not consider that in your sight distance checks, but I've undertaken many an audit where the presence of parked vehicles has been a significant safety issue, and the recommendation out of those audits has been to perhaps ban parking in an area or construct an outstand and bring forward a hold line on a side road to avoid that obstruction. Vehicle stand-up angles at intersections is a sight distance issue of sorts. So we're talking about stand-up angles. It's the angle at which a vehicle on a side road or a slip lane, the angle at which they approach the road that they're yielding to. It's desirable that the vehicle stands up at an angle as close to a right angle as possible, so that they have easy vision in both directions. You're not craning your head around and looking over your shoulder to try and see approaching vehicles. It's those Y intersections where there is quite an acute angle between sort of traffic streams that we do see particularly high crash rates. Another of the sight distance requirements is SISD, and perhaps I can put the question out there to you guys. What does SISD stand for? You can probably determine from the image that it's something about intersections. So I'll give you one of the letters. Obviously, for any sight distance requirement, we need to consider it in both the horizontal and vertical planes, and hence the two views you can see there. I don't know if we have any answers coming through.
Yeah, it was a real race on internet speed there and typing speed. And Etienne got almost there, but was too quick on his typing. So Mark gets it. Safe intersection sight distance. Etienne just I think mashed the keyboard to get something out there.
Safe intersection sight distance it is. So safe intersection sight distance provides enough time for the driver on the major road, this guy here, to see a vehicle entering from the side road, perhaps stalling, entering that potential collision zone. It provides this guy enough time and distance to see that situation unfolding, to put on the brakes and come to a stop before reaching this collision point. Obviously, safe intersection sight distance will be impeded by any roadside furniture in this area, parked vehicles here perhaps. A vertical crest, if there is one, might impede safe intersection sight distance. Another thing that I'll point out here, a key difference between some of the sight distance requirements as per Austroads is the height from and to which we are measuring. So all sight distance requirements will be measured from a driver eye height to some other height. That might be to the top of a vehicle as per safe intersection sight distance. It might be to the pavement. It might be to an object on the pavement as per SSD, stopping sight distance. In some situations, we might measure from an eye height to a tail light, a brake light or a headlight, so that a vehicle can, a motorist can see that part of the vehicle and react to a brake light perhaps. This is an example of a project where parking was formalised as per the yellow lines that you can see on the image here. This is quite a wide road intended to operate as a two-lane, two-way road, but due to its width, in peak traffic conditions, it was operating as a four-lane road, which had its own safety issues. The decision was made to formalise parking and deter that use of the road as a four-lane road by implementing these solid parking lane lines. And they would extend very close to the intersection, up to 10 metres from the intersection as per standards. This project was implemented and that was the result. Vehicles parked very close to the intersection, and very quickly issues arose with the ability for motorists to safely enter the main road from side roads. And you can see there that that vehicle, only a fraction of a second later, is upon you. It's significantly obscured by parked vehicles, and you can imagine that if this vehicle at the front, which is quite a small vehicle, was a van or a small truck or the like, the issue would be worse again. So this is a very common or typical sort of black spot safety issue where we see intersection crashes happen. What might we do to address the issue that's been introduced here? There's probably a number of things that we might do. You might say return the road to its previous form, but I'll put it out to you guys. What are some potential solutions that you might come up with as an auditor to rectify the situation that has come about?
Okay, so lots of things coming in. Jamie, they're a great group for answering these sorts of questions. So we've got some requests to remove parking. So that's obviously going to open up sightlines. There's also some discussion about curb build-outs, curb out stands, building the curb out to open up those sight lines, moving the stop line forward, or the give-way line, the hold line forward. I
like it. Removing parking would obviously be, I want to say the easiest, but I know how valuable parking is in a lot of locations, but perhaps an initial fix at least might be to remove 1 or 2 car spaces through parking restrictions to open up sight lines. I like the idea of building out the curb, which would probably result in at least 1 car park being removed as well, but you could build the curb out to the edge of the traffic lane, bring the hold line forward in association with doing that. If we wanted to provide a pedestrian crossing, or it appears that this might be a pedestrian crossing point, we'd be minimising the pedestrian crossing distance. So that would have a host of benefits, but obviously be a more expensive solution to achieve than simply removing some parking.
There's a concern around that one. I suppose it depends on the details of the design of it, but around cyclist safety and potentially creating a pinch point by doing that. So just something to be aware of. Another one, a question here, and certainly very interested in your thoughts on this one. What is your view on the allowance of 3 seconds of observation time allowed for by SISD? Makes the visibility requirements very large. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, SISD is quite an onerous requirement to achieve, and the standard it's not a mandatory requirement. It's more of a I don't believe it's put as a mandatory requirement in the Austroads guides. In a lot of cases, it is very difficult to achieve. I'll just skip back here. Can you repeat that, Ken? 3 seconds
of observation time allowed for by SISD.
Yeah. Now, I think that's probably. I'm unsure if the 3 seconds comes from a New Zealand supplementary guidance. There's a range of reaction times provided for in Austroads, and in constrained situations, we can sometimes adopt as little as perhaps 2 or even 1.5 seconds. I know in Victoria, we typically go with 2.5 seconds. So I'd suggest that 3 seconds is probably a little generous, but in the best case, we're perhaps only going to gain, if we're talking about 100 km/h environment, and shaving off 1 second of travel time is only 27 or 8 metres. So in the scheme of 260 or 70 metres that we require in a 100k zone, it helps, but it's not a lot in the scheme of things. The majority of the distance is about deceleration length.
Yeah, and so in Australia, it talks about rural environments and urban environments, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie. The idea is being that one, you're expecting road users to be more alert in the urban environments and be, but in the rural environments, maybe not as quick to react. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yep. We often do adopt a lesser reaction time in the urban environment. So 3 seconds would be, a conservative design and safer design, I'd suggest, but it does make this really quite an onerous requirement.
And Mark was just clarifying, he was referring to some in the Austroads guides, which is, I think, what we're talking about with the table with the different reaction times. A nice one from Rolly here about, if you go to the next slide where you're talking about that, the slide after, augmented reality to see through the car's screen. That'd be a good one, maybe for the future, he says. I like that. onto one here, which Keegan's brought up. So hold line must be 1.5 meters from the continuity, so the build out won't really work. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, that's different in different jurisdictions. Is that, or
Sorry, I missed that, Ken.
oh, sorry. The comment is the hold line must be 1.5 meters from the continuity. So the build out won't really work or help that much.
If you're referring to this continuity line here, we would want to provide about 1.5 meters space for cyclists through there, if that's where you're coming from, which would mean that our build out wouldn't be very large at all. It'd be sort of 1 meter ish. If there's an opportunity to reduce our lane width, we might sort of scrimp a little bit more. But if we were looking to provide for cyclists and avoid creating that pinch point, you're right. The build out certainly wouldn't extend right out to here to the continuity. It'd be somewhere in between.
Thank you.
I've touched on a number of sight distance requirements, and I encourage you to refer to the Austroads guides, parts 3 and 4 in particular, for more detail. So you can see there are a few of the key sight distance requirements, and as I've mentioned, a key difference between a number of these is the observation height. Stopping sight distance and approach sight distance are numerically equal, the difference being that stopping sight distance is measured to an object on the road, assumed to be 200 millimeters high, whereas approach sight distance is to the pavement level, and is particularly relevant on approaches to intersections where you might need to see pavement arrows and other detail that we typically provide at intersections. Entering sight distance really is a nice to have, and if we're worried about safe intersection sight distance being difficult to achieve, this one's pie in the sky. Entering sight distance is about allowing enough time and space for an entering vehicle to enter a road, accelerate, so as not to impede traffic on the major road. So that really is something that is perhaps rarely achieved. As I say, there's a list of sight distance requirements as long as your arm, and it depends on your situation how many of those you need to apply. If there are pedestrians present, we have pedestrian crossing sight distance. If it's an overtaking lane, we need to think about overtaking sight distance and so on. I should mention that it is sort of increasingly common practice for sight distance check plans to be prepared and provided as part of drawing sets for road safety audits. So if that isn't provided, you're well within your rights to ask whether sight distance checks have been undertaken and ask for evidence of that.
Jamie, Mark's provided a little more clarification and done a great job of sharing it with all attendees, but just to round out the sight distance discussions. So to clarify, SISD is the same as SSD, stopping sight distance, but has a bit at the front of the formula, DT times V divided by 3.6, where DT is decision time, observation time 3 seconds plus reaction time, which is in part 3 there.
Thanks, Mark. I think I'd better brush up on my SISD details.
That's good. That's good. Good detail. Thank you.
So here is a list of issues commonly found during road safety audits of intersections. The checklists contained in the Austroads guide provide some great reference lists of common issues, including these, not all of which will be relevant to a particular project, but they really are a good checklist, especially for newer auditors to have in your back pocket when you're undertaking an audit, to make sure that you're considering all the right things. Some of these issues we've touched on today. If there are any questions about any in particular, I'm happy to give you my 2 cents worth. Otherwise, I may just pick a couple to discuss. How are we looking for time, Ken?
We're good, Jamie. We've got plenty of time. I'm going to use a little bit of time at the end to do a little work example on our desktop audit, just so people can see how to do that. But yeah, plenty of time. We'll probably take a bit of a stretch break in about 5 minutes. But we'll see if anybody's got any of those in particular. Maybe some of them aren't terms that New Zealand would particularly use. Danish offset is the crossing where you walk into the middle of into the median and then along the median a bit as a pedestrian crossing sort of type.
Many of these issues at intersections relate to conflicts between vehicles, and also with vulnerable road users, and managing the impact energies at locations where we might encounter pedestrians or cyclists, providing adequate space and sight distance to those users. Obviously, there are increased requirements around drainage and the like at intersections, perhaps some DDA requirements at crossing points.
Yeah. So there was a question, what is DDA?
DDA, Disability Discrimination Act, and I wonder if that is an Australian term. But this is around providing, ensuring that our roads, and particularly intersections and pedestrian crossing points, are accessible by all road users. So the visually impaired, mobility impaired, and it's a requirement certainly in Victoria that any road project, whether it be a new piece of road or an improvement to an existing road, that piece of road is made DDA compliant. So that typical elements that affects pedestrian crossing points, so providing pram ramps that are appropriate grades, providing devices like warning tactiles to advise visually impaired pedestrians of crossing points. Ensuring that the surfaces that pedestrians use are appropriate in terms of their surface and grade and so on.
And random question on pram ramps. Was it you who told me that pram ramps aren't called pram ramps because, like a pram that you would push through? It's actually some other reason for it?
Yeah, it comes from the word perambulate, I believe.
Kathy, add that to the trivia questions. And we'll see if anybody else wants to write in that they knew that. I'll be pretty impressed.
Which I think means to walk or similar. Someone might confirm or correct me on that.
Means to walk slow. Oh, we're getting all sorts of background. A baby pram used to be called a perambulator in Victorian times. And some confirmation on that. Good stuff. So it is a generation of the same sort of word anyway. But, yeah. Very good. All right. Let's maybe take a little, just before you jump into, you've got a few slides to still go, don't you?
we got?
Sorry, Ken, can I just jump in there? There was a question in amongst the perambulators on the topic of tactiles. What are the accepted standard we design to for tactile pavers? Many cities adopt their own policies or ideas. Is there anything there, Jamie or Ken?
It is subject to the requirements of the jurisdiction. Each will usually have their own list of accepted products and guidance around their use. I know Victoria has a road design note that is effectively a supplement to the Australian standard, and it has a use of accepted suppliers and product types. So look, it certainly does vary. There are lots of different types around, from the sort of, the integrated sort of plastic type ones to the metal individual bumps. Lots of variation in colours. And just on that, within an area, I think some consistency, or achieving as much consistency in an area as possible is important. So I guess it's fine that jurisdictions have some differences in their requirements.
James has put into the chat there some New Zealand guidance, RTS 14, the Road and Traffic Standards Series, guidelines for facilities for blind and vision impaired pedestrians. So good one to have a look at. Looks like a good 81 pages of reading on the topic. So I think we're about to have a break, but do you have one more slide, Jake?
One more, yeah. So this slide discuss. Do you want me to keep going, Ken?
Yeah, do that last one, and then that's probably a good time to take a break.
So this list relates largely to intersections. At mid-block sections, our focus is a little different. We're thinking more about the road cross-section and ensuring that we're allocating sufficient space to road users, lane widths, numbers of lanes and so on, provision for cyclists, batter slopes, so there are roadside hazards present that we might need to protect, what form of drainage do we have, and so on. So these considerations, again, are listed in the Austroads checklist, so I encourage you to refer to that as part of your audits, but certainly don't expect to need to comment on each and every one of the items in those checklists for a particular project. They're one-size-fits-all lists, but it's a good reminder sometimes of some things that you might need to think about.
Heather's got a good question here around the tactile ground surface indicators and the like. Now, are you going to recommend that in areas where there aren't really any around? It's not, part of the existing, and doing an intersection upgrade or the like. What are your thoughts on that as a road safety auditor, then maybe more general as a sort of designer and project manager?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's one that I wrestle with a lot of times. There are some projects that you audit where you just think it might be silly to recommend that because it's such an isolated location. You wouldn't, there aren't connecting facilities that would allow a visually impaired person, for instance, to get to that location. But I guess we don't want to sort of preclude visually impaired and mobility impaired pedestrians from using a facility in the future. We don't know what other works might happen down the track that might attract pedestrians to that location. So sometimes where I'm, uncertain as to whether or not, a visually or mobility impaired pedestrian might be inclined to use an area, I'll sort of put it back on the project manager to, assess, assess the how do I put it, whether or not that facility is likely to be used by pedestrians that might require those facilities. Yeah. And then to consider implementing those measures if they deem it necessary.
Yeah. And I suppose as an auditor, a lot of them I look at in different missing bits or slightly potentially aligned wrong and the like, and I really think, geez, the odds of that actually going through to a fatal or serious injury crash is so minuscule. However, you see it, and I often will put them in just as a to note. I don't specifically risk rate it, because I think if you did that, it would come out so incredibly low. But it's more just that sort of, you've seen it, you're helping out the project team, just pop it in as a to note, maybe as a list of different things. But I suppose that general philosophy on the Disability Discrimination Act and compliance with all this is that over many years and all the project upgrades, eventually everything will start to get upgraded and everything's in line. Then it's going to be a better outcome for those sorts of pedestrians. So, yeah, good. All right, thanks, Jamie. Any final questions for Jamie? Lots of good chat coming in there.
I think people are saying it's potty break time, Ken. That's the New Zealand term.
Yeah. It is. So let's take 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes. And thank you, Jamie, for popping your head in. Nice road behind you. Got some good vertical and horizontal geometry going on there. We will see you back shortly. Thanks, Jamie. All right, well, we'll get back into it. And yeah, we've got a few things to cover, not a huge amount more for this session. And I will do a little bit of a worked example of a road safety audit from your roundabout to traffic signals example there. And I'm sure a lot of you have had a look at that. Some of you have got lots of other work on and craziness in life, and we'll get to that when you can. But let's maybe, I'll just share my screen and have a brief chat about a couple of other things here. You still with us there, Kathy?
Certainly am, Ken. What a busy calendar you've got.
It's always a surprise what will pop up when I share my screen. Good. Okay. So let's have a chat about construction sites, roadwork sites. And there was a comment that came in there that Jamie had some tough wallies in amongst his. And I'll give you a second to make sure you see any tough wallies in this slide. And hopefully we'll get our wally count right in the answers as well there for this session. Keeps us on our toes as well as you on your toes. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on construction site traffic management style road safety auditing for a couple of reasons. One, it is certainly not an area of expertise for myself. I have to put my hand up and say that's not an area I spend a lot of time with. I have some colleagues who love it. The second one is that it's not that common a road safety audit stage, I suppose you would say. Now, it is available as an option in New Zealand. And one of the key challenges that I see with this is the confusion on the terminology. And so I put this one up straight away off the bat. We've got this idea that you could road safety audit a traffic management construction site. But then there's this sort of compliance auditing. Now, the compliance auditing is the checking whether it meets the code of practice for temporary traffic management, any relevant standards and the like. There's also a bit of compliance auditing, which is what I say your surveillance officer or site engineer might do, which is to check that, whatever traffic management plan or traffic guidance scheme was produced, has been laid out as per what was required, and checking that it's maintained, that things haven't been knocked over, and so checking the taper lengths, the right bollards are out. So the thing that I see quite a bit of is that people are calling this one, that compliance, a road safety audit. And this to me is a bigger picture issue where we are starting to, this is more in Australia. I haven't seen this happening in New Zealand, but it starts to then produce this change in mindset on what a road safety audit is. And it's certainly been these construction site roadworks, road safety audits as such, that are starting to produce these sort of almost one pages, saying the taper lengths was too short, and fix that and this. To me, that's important stuff, but that's not a road safety audit. That's your compliance audit. That's your check. That's important part of managing your construction site. But the road safety audit is far bigger and is a far more elaborate process than just that simple check. So I wanted to point that out from the get-go. Austroads has a suite of new documents on temporary traffic management. So those playing in this space will be quite aware of these, no doubt. There's 10 parts to that, and I believe we've put them on your memory stick and in Moodle. But if we haven't, we can certainly upload those. But of course, with all the Austroads guides these days, they are freely available for download, so you can grab that. Now, a couple of little points on the New Zealand context, which was sent through by Jessica, just to highlight this. We sort of talked about how much emphasis do we want to put on roadworks, construction site road safety auditing in this course, and it was seen that we would keep that to an absolute minimum to spend more time on the design stage road safety auditing. But so they're not an investment requirement through the project development for Waka Kotahi. So it may be considered that there's a need for it in addition to the 4 project milestones, and especially around those complex layouts, that you might consider going beyond that compliance audit with the check against the code of practice. So it is a possibility. And then it appears to be a bit of alterations and changes in this space coming up, and moving away from that direct check to a more principle-based, risk-based review of the layouts. And so some further information there. So we'll share these slides with you because they won't be in the notes, because we only just recently received those. This diagram is sort of where I see it. If you're going to do a road safety audit in your major sort of construction site, that you would review the plans, the traffic guidance schemes, how it's all going to work, and a report would be produced at that stage. There would be alterations to the plan and the like. Within this, you would still do an inspection day and night before the scheme goes out there, to get an idea of any other things that may be out there that would be feeding in there. So that would be looking, okay, well, there's a fast food store on the corner here, and could we be blocking access? Or, okay, people seem to be turning now. There's a school down there, and a lot of traffic may be diverted down that way. So holistically looking at that. I mean, in the traffic management planning, they should be thinking about these, but you're that extra independent set of eyes. Then, once it sort of goes into play and they've rolled it out there after they've made the different changes, there really is sort of another inspection point. Now, that is again, checking that the scheme has gone out as planned, but also checking that there's no wider things that weren't picked up. It's almost like your sort of post-opening as such. And then if there are any major changes to the scheme, and we know that they're somewhat dynamic construction sites, roadwork sites, and in the sense that they might be moving down the road, or they might have finished one stage and be altering to another, that you would then sort of check that as well. So it becomes almost an entity within its own right. So that's the theory on it, and lots of different things get picked up, and are issues you might find in these construction site road safety audits. So some of the common things with advanced warning, speeds, the layouts selected, permanent and temporary features and how they interact is a big one. So misunderstanding for drivers on what is coming up, and lots of others there. I suppose remembering to think about how pedestrians and cyclists are going to navigate the site is very important, sometimes forgotten. Interesting examples popping up quite a bit these days of major works to build cycling facilities, but during the works, no consideration for cyclists on these major cycling corridors. So there's an example of where we need to always consider all road users. Before I take a few questions on this one, this topic, and as I say, I'm not going to spend too much more time on this. In Australia, at least, and I don't know for New Zealand, I always warn people that are going to get into road safety auditing of construction sites and work zones that is the most litigated, the most likely that you will be sued as a road safety auditor. And the reasoning for that is, if there are incidents, there's a very interesting look at it from our legal system, and it becomes sort of a the lawyers are going after the companies that are managing the traffic and managing the worksite and managing the construction for injured parties, yes, it's quite interesting. And so then, of course, they have engaged an auditor, and so they're then trying to push all blame onto the auditor, and it becomes this very messy sort of legal battle. So I always flag that just to be aware of. Certainly see a lot of legal battles going on around that. But it's very rare that an auditor gets pulled into a dispute about a civil design or new facility design. I mean, it does happen, but it's far rarer than the construction site ones. So let's see if any questions came in there, Kathy.
Look, it was all commentary, Ken, and it was all about starting an Australian team called the Wombats for the rugby union.
Okay. Good. This is a great group. Okay. End roadworks, I say then. All right. Thank you.
Sorry, that's probably thrown you somewhat.
No, I like it. I'll let me ponder that one for a while. It's good Friday afternoon bed.
Mm-hmm.
Rightio. Let me tell you one more thing before we do a little worked example, and then I'll let you go and knock off for the week. Okay. So audit checklists. Okay. In the Austroads Guide to Road Safety, Part 6A, Road Safety Audit Guidelines there are these things called checklists. Now, the first thing I want to say is that in the new guide, which I just sent up to the Austroads board for approval, fingers crossed, we've renamed checklists to prompt lists. Prompt lists. Why have we done that? Because we don't want anybody to think that if they just go through and tick and cross all of that, they've done a road safety audit. There is a whole lot more things that could eventuate out there. These have tried to incorporate lots of things to prompt thinking, but certainly not as a checklist as such. And in the Austroads guide, they're provided in these different audit stages, and you can look at that, and they duplicate each other. Detailed design stage, for example, there's quite a lot of questions in there, 14 pages worth of questions that you would sort of ask yourself as you're looking through the design. Now, what I find is these are wonderful for people new to auditing. It forces them into a certain, making sure they think about all these different issues, think about pedestrian, cyclists, motorcyclists, drainage, lighting, sight lines, horizontal, vertical geometry, design lines, public transport, the lot. Like it's a huge amount. Actually, I shouldn't say the lot, a lot of stuff. You always do need to just take that holistic view and common sense and see if there's anything else out there. The new guidelines that'll come out have more questions, more information now on some of the things that didn't get updated in past ones, more about ITS, so intelligent transport systems, active warning signs, those sorts of features. A bit more enhancement on pedestrians and cyclists because they were getting, they were certainly identified in these last ones, but maybe not as much as we should have. The New Zealand guidelines have a set of checklists as well, a little more concise, but nonetheless, they are there, page 43 to 53, covering off, again, those stages. So again, just generating a bit of that thinking. So you can use those if you're ever struggling to sort of get a logical way to think through issues on a project. So I just reiterate there that they're thought starters only. Always important to stand back, to look broadly at the project. There's many items that will be not applicable. You'll go through and, because these are trying to cover off all road scenarios, you will have one specific road scenario, so there'll be a whole lot of stuff that's not applicable. And the other one is you don't submit these checklists as part of a road safety audit. They're not part of that package to show that you've thought about all these things. No, a road safety audit only identifies the issues that the road safety issues you've found, not what you looked at and what you thought decided wasn't relevant. It's just the issues. So, any questions on checklists?
Might just give people a minute to digest that one and ask any questions.
And Kathy, I think now we will get you to just show people while I get together a few of my notes on the Montrose roundabout.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to show people what they are going to have to do and where things are, and then we'll finish off with a work example, and then everybody can finish for the week.
Yep, for sure. So what we have in regards to your site that you're going to be doing shortly, your location is in here. So it's in module 5. There's no webinar for this one. So we've got today's and then we've got next Friday's. But you're going to complete your road safety audit site visit. And everyone should have a site in here. So there's the site location and your name at the end of it. So have a look for that one. The RSA form is stuck in the middle here, so I might find a way to pop it up the top there, but that's what you're going to complete the template. Now, did you want to bring that one up now, Ken? Or not just yet?
Yeah. Let's do all this, and then as I said, I'm going to do the worked example, but people may decide to use the worked example time to do their own report or the like. But I'll work through one audit finding from the desktop exercise. But let's have a look. So we've got this time a similar template, but this is your actual Waka Kotahi template downloaded from the website there, with a few little alterations to make it a training course. But if you're doing those audits, you download this one. So you can put in the project name, and again, we've highlighted in yellow either the light yellow or the bright yellow, anything that you need to fill out. You don't want to hear how much time I spent trying to make the light yellow into a bright yellow, but because it's a template field, it didn't. Anyway, I'm off topic.
No, that does answer my question about why the two yellows. But anyway, go on.
It was a nightmare.
But you interlinked the logos, so that was good.
I gave up on bright, and I just said, how do we get our logos to interlink? Okay, so you're going to fill this out. Now, it's got the background pre-written in there. That's straight from the template, but we want you to pop in any information that you were given there, and name and position and company of the audit team. So it's just going to be you, obviously, for this one. Although what are we saying, Kathy? A bit like the Safe System Assessment one, if you're doing it in teams, you can have a team. Have you got multiple people in the few?
Yeah, absolutely, we do. So you can do it with your friend if you want to, and if your particular site that we've assigned you, this has been based on the address details that you gave us. So if that doesn't work, then you can feel free to choose a different one in there if that works for you, or you can get in touch with us and we'll conjure up something new.
Yes, Rolly's also put in there, have we read the guidelines on the use of the logo, which I must admit, I knew there were guidelines. I didn't quite read them all. I should do that. Going to go with the apologising is easier than asking for permission.
Okay, back to this. Do we need a nighttime inspection?
No. Let's delete.
Okay.
We're not going to do nighttime inspection. That's a good point. We really don't want you going out there at night. I mean, the reason it's in there is to remind everybody that for a real road safety audit, you absolutely do need to go out there at night, unless you've got a really good justification for why not. So then there's, again, a bit of general information that stays in there from the template. You've got the risk matrix that appears there, and you've got a little bit of information there that goes back stays there for the client to read if there's a serious issue, what they should do about it. But we haven't had anything highlighted there. So, scope of audit. Yep. Okay, you give us a little bit of a detail on what the audit is. Maybe snip the design, plonk it in there so everybody's on the same page. And you say what the document was, and you provide any details there about it. Project description, so that can be a broader description of the project and a snip of the map. Now, for this assignment, as I say, I don't want you writing, that's probably far more than I would need to see for this assignment. It's more in there just to ensure that you know that you'd have to do this in a proper order, but you can put a few little words down to describe what it is. Snip of a map showing where you're going to do that. I've put that example in there again, just so you can see one written out and everything that needs to be done. But then, just like the desktop one you've been doing, we want to see some audit findings. And how many did we have? I think 3 was our requirement. 1, 2, 3. You signed the audit. And you put a photo of yourself again on site. Show that you went there in your high-vis vest, of course. And again, we want to say safety on site, very important. There's no need to be wandering around the roadside, doing any, on the road at all. All of these sites can be done very safely from a distance, park safely, don't be a hazard to others. And if you have any concerns at all with safety, don't do it. The exercise, talk to us. We'll give you other alternatives, other options. But as we say, it can be done safely. You're all quite experienced with this. You have your own workplace health and safety considerations, and so take that all on. Okay, let's take any questions or comments on the assignment you've got. And again, probably, Kathy, there will be a question about when is this due?
Tomorrow? No. No, 2 weeks. 2 weeks for this one. I think we've got 6th of August in there. Now there's yes, I've got a problem with one of the documents won't download, and is the New Zealand template for the Montrose site or just the New Zealand site? Okay, so good question, John, because we've given you an Australian site with a New Zealand template, haven't we?
Correct. So what we're doing is trying to, because you're on New Zealand, always using the New Zealand template, we're just getting you to look at a design that we happen to have available to us, so we could get the 360-degree footage. So that's just the design, but we want you to use the templates we provided. So just go to Moodle, get that template, use it. And the only difference in the template for the Montrose roundabout design is that we just stripped out all of the fluff at the top about, project background and documents and everything. We just jumped straight to the findings, because it's just an exercise in practicing writing the findings, risk rating, making recommendations. So that was that exercise. The exercise for your New Zealand site is all about going through and, crafting that whole document, still using the New Zealand template. So hopefully that explains that.
We couldn't quite get to New Zealand to do the 360 filming. Okay, so yes, if you are going to do it in a team, then you do just need to submit the one audit document. So one of you submit that in Moodle, and just make sure both team members' names are in there, and Ken will do the marking and add the comments and the score and everything to both people. So there's that. Good. What else? No night audit, we said. And I'm just following up on a missing one and one that needs to be reloaded. So I'll get onto that.
And of course, as you go through this, if you would like to have a bit of one-on-one chat about it, you're struggling to find issues that you want to write up, you're confused about something, get in contact. There's lots of ways to do that. You can shoot an email through to Kathy or myself, and we can answer it via that. You can organise a one-on-one Zoom or Teams catch-up, phone call. We're happy to do that. We can set up a little WhatsApp group if you want. Whatever you want, we're happy to work through that with you. We're here to help. So while Kathy works through some of the one-on-one questions, like people not being able to find a site for their name and the like, what I'm going to do is just work through an audit finding on the 360-degree Montrose roundabout, and just sort of go from start to end on how I would write that up, just as an example. Now, this is really optional. I think some of you are, delving, way ahead into this. So if you don't, if you say, no, I'm good, I know what I'm doing, I'm happy to carry on, I've found issues, or I'll find it, you're welcome to sort of log off now and go and get a good start on that. But if you do want to see, I'm happy to run through that now. Kathy, any final comments? Is there a quiz? There's a quiz for this week, isn't there?
Yeah, there is a quiz. Let's hope I got the Wallies right.
We're always up for anybody who disagrees with Wally's lodging an argument, and not only will you get rectified your score, you might get a prize as well. Sorry, I just got thrown by a comment, somebody asking if they can do the City of Yarra one, which I don't know how we must have put that in the folder as well, I suppose.
Yeah, so some people are writing to the details, which I should have known. We did have the City of Yarra one in there. That was just in case the whole 360 one didn't come together in time, because we did some last minute filming and that sort of thing. But now people want the City of Yarra. The City of Yarra is gone. It's gone. Watch Ken now and get a free audit finding. That's what you can do now. Oh, don't. It's not packed with mistakes.
I think they mean the Yarra.
Oh, the City of Yarra. I thought you... I thought it was talking about my mistakes.
No, not yours. The City of Yarra, yeah, that's an audit, road safety audit goldmine.
Yes.
The reason we didn't do that one is because they've built it, and so we can't get the 360-degree footage of unbuilt site. But yeah, no, it's a good one. All right. Okay. Oh, so Kevin's just said he's worked hard. He's done 24-hour day, didn't sleep to find issues in the Montrose roundabout. I'm about to put one out there. Oh, well.
Should we ask for a suggestion of an issue before we put one out there?
How about this, Kathy?
Okay. How about we give Kevin a prize?
Yeah. How about this? How about I do the Yarra one?
Oh, okay. Good.
Right up here. Oh, jeez.
I can unhide it.
No. I've got it. Got it.
Okay.
Exciting. Can you see my screen? Can you see yourself?
Yeah. But you stop covering your mouth when you talk.
Sorry. Can you can you see? Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So what we've got here is a design from, I don't even know how they knew it was the City of Yarra. Anyway, I'm going to display it here. From the City of Yarra, and what their plan is to create a Copenhagen style lane. So they're taking parking from curbside, pushing it out, putting a concrete separator in, and running bikes along curbside in each direction, parking out in the road, and then they've got the road through there. Gets a lot more complicated up here because we've got a large median with a tram, a light rail going through the middle. you've got it's actually an eastbound carriageway, even though it's down the page. So eastbound carriageway, a westbound carriageway. They are altering the lane configuration here to 2 lanes north, sorry, 1 lane north, 2 lanes south, and heading up west. Adding a new speed hump in. Adding some bike storage boxes up the front here. And here's a picture of it on site. So this picture is taken looking up one of the carriageways. So this picture was taken from down here, looking up this way. So we'll get back to that. You can see that up there. The area is quite densely populated, lots of cafes, bars, office buildings, residential apartments, quite a busy, vibrant area. Here's some aerial imagery of the existing conditions. So you can see the parking curbside at the moment, or the before conditions. A little bit of street view on that. You can see there's the curbside parking, and if we go a little bit forward, you can see the tram going through. A little bit further forward, 2 lanes coming out, and we go around. There we go. If we turn around and we look back on it, we can see it's already getting marked up for some work. And they're trying to produce something similar to this, which we've talked about, with a curb separator and cycle facility and parking just next to that. The other side of the road has the sort of back-to-back concrete curb, as the separator, no parking. So, does anybody have an issue? Does anybody immediately see an issue to that, or do you want me to just grab one and we'll have a chat about it?
Lots of issues, Ken. Lack of storage, no swept path, arrows the wrong way around in the link, super narrow lanes.
Good issues already. Yes, there we go. Maybe this one was just too easy for this group. We had to give them something harder, the Montrose roundabout. So some people are immediately picking the no right turn arrow, the left turn arrow here on up into a one-way carriageway. So this is an interesting one. I mean, this you would assume is just a drafting error. They've got the arrow the wrong way around. However, you do need to order it as though they're going to build that. And you need to point that out. I mean, this stuff gets rectified, no questions asked, and is something that we'd be expected to pick up. But you still write it up as an audit, audit finding. So that's a good one. I don't think I'll write that one up because it's sort of oh no, it's a good one, but I want to write up something a little bit different. There was narrow lanes was a really good one. I mean, we've got here a 2.8 metre wide lane, 3.2, still very, very narrow even. And for the left turning vehicle, 2.9 and a 2.9 here. And thinking about how a larger vehicle could possibly get in to this, if they're trying to come up here and get into that, that's probably longer than it would be, but we're in some big trouble there, obviously. So there's a good issue, but you're also going to have some side swiping challenges with these here. Just trying to pick which one I'm going to write up. I'm just looking at a few others there. This is good. I'm going to write up one here as we go, which is, let's, I'm just trying to decide which one I want to write up. I'm actually going to write up one which is a little more obscure, but I think is a genuine safety issue at this site. You don't actually have enough information to actually do this because you didn't get given the signal phasing or the like. But what happens out of here is there's an interesting way that there is a possibility for a pedestrian to be crossing as these vehicles are trying to turn. It shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have those double turns and pedestrian ability to do that. It's kind of the lag of the phase, so it's probably not likely to occur often, but I'm just drawing a little diagram there of the issue so I can snip it. So a pedestrian running late, basically running across there could be, they would be running against the red man, but could there's a dynamic visual obstruction possibility there. Let me just snip that. So this is where two vehicles are turning right, pedestrian crossing. Actually, I'm going to put a little pedestrian in there just for fun. And okay. I'm just going to snip this. So I've got it for my audit finding. Okay. So let's now go and write up this little finding. So hopefully, Kathy, you're seeing the word template.
Yep, all good.
Yeah, so it's a pedestrian head start, but so this is a very odd arrangement because it would never really be, I've never, well, there is an intersection down the road that does it and it doesn't perform well either. So let's go. Heading is pedestrian. I'll just go with pedestrians. I'll go with pedestrian safety. Right turn. Dynamic visual obstruction. So we will come back to selecting the concern rating, but let's go to here. I'm going to place my snip in there because I basically told the story with that snip, I think. Oh, okay. And I'm going to start writing it up here and we'll format it a little bit later. So the auditor is concerned that a pedestrian may be struck by a right turning vehicle by right turning vehicle into the Victoria Parade concern is due to the is due to the dynamic visual obstruction dynamic visual obstruction that could if two vehicles are turning and a pedestrian is late in crossing. So I'm trying to describe the issue. Remember our formula? I'm describing the issue. The crash that could happen, I've sort of said that already, the pedestrian may be struck. This may result in a pedestrian being struck by a passenger vehicle. Passenger wrong. At speeds of, now the question is, what speed do I think this could happen? I kind of think this would be below 30 kilometers an hour, but it could be because it's sort of moving around. I'm going to go with 20 to 30 kilometers per hour. Is what I think. Now, it's very hard to do this without, being on the site, seeing it, getting a good feel for all of this. But I'm starting to tell a story. This one instruct passenger. Okay. Now what I want to do is talk about the factors that may increase the risk at this. That the factors that increase the risk of this crash are the signal phasing not provided. Now the other thing is that if you haven't got the signal phasing, but you're concerned about this, you could write, maybe we'll go with that. So we haven't seen the signal phasing. The auditors have assumed that the signal phasing is similar to the corner of Punt Road and Victoria Parade, and that pedestrians will be able to cross at the same time. The pedestrians will have a head start. Now, the reason you sort of put that in there is, if they want to say, no, we're not going to do that, we're going to have dedicated phases, they can answer this audit finding down here very easily. They can respond to that, it's clear in writing and everybody's happy. If they were planning to do it, they might have to alter their design. The risk is increased due to the being close to the tram stop, meaning that pedestrians will, meaning that some pedestrians, let's go with may, be running for the tram. It is also increased by the high traffic volumes. Thereby increasing the chance of dynamic. you could comment on lighting and other things if you'd identified that on site as extra risk factors, but I'll leave that for now. So we've done the issue, we've done the crash, pedestrian being struck. We've done the factors that may increase risk, and then we'll go Ostroads. Ostroads guide. Now somebody might be able to help me out here, but I'm thinking Ostroads guide to road design part 4. Is where I then go to the standard, because I'm pretty sure somewhere in there it says you can't do, you should never do a double right turn with any opposing stream. So this would not only be pedestrians, but if it was a crossroad, you should never do a double right turn with opposing traffic, and it would equally be applicable with pedestrians there. So, so I'm just going to, without going to the guidelines and finding that bit, I'm going to go Ostroads Guide to Road Design Part 4.
Ken, just a minute to go, so.
Oh, okay, so we'll go blah, blah, blah. I didn't realise how long it takes me to write an audit finding. So you've gone through that, and then you go, well, what's the risk here? Okay, frequency of crashes, and then you just drop down and you go, well, I think if they build it like that, that these crashes will happen occasionally. If they do, what's the chance it's going to result in death or serious injury? I was going to say likely, because once that's hit, it's a pedestrian, it's very vulnerable. So occasional, likely, whip up to my thing and go occasional, likely, moderate risk. So then I come back down here and I grab this, click on that, and go with moderate risk. Then you write in your recommendation, and it'll be phasing, and that will be a supporting treatment, because it's not actually eliminating the possibility that somebody could do that if they go through the red or pedestrian walks out there anyway, but it's making it very unlikely. All right, so I've gone over time and I apologise, but I was just getting engrossed in this little design audit finding. Thank you, everybody. Kathy, any final comments?
No, if we've fixed up those few bits and pieces, so they're all good to go now. And if you're having any issues with your site, as Ken said, just get in touch with us over the course of the next week. Otherwise, we'll see you next Friday.
Everybody.
See ya. Bye.
Have a good weekend.